Welcome to New Europe Studios. This is a New Europe Studios special. With us today we are honored to have the President of the Philippines, Mr. Benigno Aquino III, who is actually visiting Brussels for the first time. Mr. President, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
We're very honored to have you with us today.
Definitely the honors are, sir.
Thank you. Actually, you are visiting for the first time Brussels and the European Union.
Yes,
and this coincides with the 50 years since the relationship of the Philippines with the European Union started.
That's correct.
If we go a little bit back in time, how would you say was this 50 years? What was the experience of the Philippines with this relationship with the European Union?
Well, sir, we can even go back centuries before that and our dealings with Europe in particular. But just in the 50 years, of course, there's been tremendous help from the European Union. For instance, we have given to our Congress the proposed measure that reorders the so-called Bangsamoro portion of the Philippines, which seeks to address the Muslim secessionist problem that we've had for decades. To get to that root, there has been a lot of individual and EU participation in the peace process, to include what we call the International Monitoring Team. There was a ceasefire. They helped us maintain the ceasefire, helped us provide the environment wherein negotiations could start. And once the negotiations have started, to impart knowledge to us with regards to managing autonomous regions and resolving conflict in general. They've helped us push for more adherence to observing human rights universally, especially for the challenges that our country had to face. And I guess in gist, there used to be a lot of economic relations between the Philippines and member states of the European Union. Somehow this has gone to the wayside, but that hasn't stopped on the official governmental side, wherein we think that engagement with the European Union has been a positive factor in helping us achieve our aspirations as a people.
And I think it's 2 years now that the Philippines has signed a cooperation agreement with the European Union.
Yes.
Now, does this cooperation agreement offer new opportunities? Actually, today you met, I think, with the President of the Council, Mr. Van Rompuy.
Yes.
In his statement, he says that he expects cooperation between the Philippines and the European Union to more than double in the next 6 years. Is this?
We expect that, sir. Of course, the agreement has to be ratified. And I understand it is under process already, and we're really looking forward, and we're very positive that this will come into a reality. This provides the comprehensive framework on engagement on so many different fields: maritime security, migration policies, enhanced trade relationships, increased political cooperation, and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, if we were to digest it into more, how should I put it, digestible form, it seeks to acknowledge the fact that one of the points we keep on stressing is, in an increasingly shrinking world, there is no problem that is confined to a particular region or a particular country. More and more, there is greater need for cooperation on so many different fronts if we are to overcome the challenges. And the cooperation agreement provides that framework. And amongst the challenges, of course, currently, you have the pandemics, or threatened pandemics.
Yes. Now we have the Ebola.
Ebola. The Philippines has is part of the UN peacekeeping forces in Liberia, about 115. And of course, we are a developing country. We might not have as advanced medical science that will deal with such an emergency. There are, I think, commonly known tensions as to the pressures being exerted on the health system in Liberia in particular. We're worried about our peacekeepers. We're worried about the potential danger once they're repatriated back home. Terrorism, the IS crisis. We are also in the peacekeeping force of monitoring the disengagement of forces between Syria and Israel in the Golden Heights. We've had a recent incident in that. Global climate change is also something that has to be taken as a whole. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, these challenges, global in nature, cannot have a solution that is limited to a country or a region. And
it touched everybody.
Yes, and the mantra is, we overcome this together or we collectively lose. And again, all of these interactions we've had with the European Union's member states seeks to enhance greater cooperation into these common challenges, hopefully providing a quicker solution and more comprehensive solution to everybody's benefit.
And do you find this, what you say, that it is reciprocated in the European Union talks that you had until now?
Definitely.
Everybody's approaching the subject in the same way.
Yes, perhaps some will be more intense and others will be a little less intense and different focus. But the overall picture is that there is that drive, you know, for the common good.
I just wanted to mention, now that you mentioned cooperation in different fields and of course the global situation, a very important change and very unique change that is happening lately is the switch of the international center of gravity from the Atlantic towards the Pacific. Now the Pacific is rising. What is your opinion? What is your view of the future given this change?
Well, sir, just for ASEAN alone, the 10 member countries represent a market of 600 million people. In the Philippines case, we will be approaching, we will have the start of a demographic sweet spot wherein the bulk of our population will be of working age. And this is seen to continue for the next 30 years. On top of that, there are already studies by international agencies and various private companies that tell us that even as early as 2019, we will hit the inflection point, which is the jump of portion where there's increased purchasing ability. So perhaps in the Atlantic, you would have more advanced and developed and mature economies. The greatest growth potentials will be in emerging markets like Asia. And given the size of the populations of Asia, the built-in market already presents so much potential, again, for mutual benefit. We've been talking to various concerns that will help us in terms of renewable energy, railway systems, and so on and so forth. Their expertise, very advanced, will redound to getting our projects quicker, more efficient, and having a positive effect on our people soonest. So again, there is a duality and complementary nature between what Europe, for instance, has to offer and what the needs of Asia have, and conversely, what Asia can meet in terms of Europe's needs. And this really seems to be the natural progression, but what is incumbent upon all of us is to ensure that it happens sooner rather than later.
Especially the Philippines within Asia.
Yes.
It's actually the fastest growing economy, I believe, at this moment.
I think we were edged out by Malaysia.
It must have been recent.
In the latest tally. But what is significant is Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia were ahead of us in the curve, but we have been one of the best performing. And at some points in time, depending on which month you ask, we were second, for instance, to China in terms of growth in the Southeast Asian and in the corridor, and within ASEAN, and then also in relation to China.
And to what do you attribute this growth?
Well, sir, we believe that the greatest resource of the Philippines is our people. And this is, we have 10 million of our population outside of the country. And when I was first elected into office, what was truly amazing was the praise that was heaped upon them by all of my, my counterparts in all of the visits that we attended. Counterparts in government, counterparts in business were singing really tremendous praises. And it led to concretization of the belief that given the right opportunity and environment, our people will shine. So in the Philippines, what we did was go back to the basics. What is government there for? It is to serve the people. It is not to serve the interests of a few. So we had the mantra during the campaign that said, where there is no corruption, there should be no poverty. And we have been working towards that. We have reviewed, for instance, the budget itself. Do not fund projects that do not have a tangible result. The processes involved in expenditure of the budget, cutting down the red tape, cutting down the avenues for corruption, has also been one of the other things that we did. Investing in our people, especially in terms of education, in terms of health. Whereas before, the National Health Insurance Program benefited at most 63%. We now have mid-80s enrollment in the National Health Program, Health Insurance Program, to include a wider range of diseases covered by the National Health Insurance Program. Our Ministry of Health, for instance, has had a threefold increase from the time we started. Now, even items for basic education, we've increased the number of years for our children from a 10-year program to a 12-year basic education program. we inherited backlogs in terms of classrooms, books, chairs, etc. Classrooms are almost 66,800 classrooms that we had to build. Now, the national budget can support something like 8,000 classrooms per year. I have a 6-year term. 6 times 8 produces 48,000. I would have left office and there would have still been a deficit. But through various financing schemes, through inclusion of private partnerships also, private-public partnerships in it, we eliminated that backlog as early as the 3rd year of our administration. So and to couple with that with a conditional cash transfer program, wherein a stipend is given to, we inherited the program with 800,000 households in the program. We now have 4.1 million families in that program. The primary condition is keep your children in school. We've expanded that program this year to include not just the elementary level, but also high school. This proceeds from a study that says completing a high school education guarantees or enables the participant to have a 40% premium on potential earnings. And the numbers now, just comparing 2012 and 2013, there was 2.5 million of our population that we moved out of the poverty line. So the new emphasis now is those that have been moved out of the poverty line or living below the poverty line should be pushed as far away as possible. Because they might have overcome the poverty line, but one catastrophic illness or one natural disaster brings them back down. Yes. So the drive now is to push them further and further away. 1.6 million new jobs in the last reckoning. So again, belief in the people, give them the right opportunity, the right environment. We talk with industries, for instance. One of the things that we discovered early on, we have a website listing vacancies and applicants. So applicants can join in, enroll. And there was always a disparity, something in the neighborhood of 50% applicants for the 100% of jobs available. There was a mismatch of skills and jobs available. So our higher education, the Technical Vocational Agency, the Department of Labor have talked, and the economic cluster have talked to industries and asked, what do you need at what point in time? So that has resulted in closer matching of skills availability and the skills need of industry, which has resulted, for instance, in the technical vocational sector. When we started out, a placement rate of 28.5%. It is now 60, I think it's about 68%. And then that has, and in certain instances, about 93% placement rate.
93%?
Specific areas where there was greater cooperation. So all of this has redounded to an optimism of the people, and this has become infectious, that there is, of course, a greater consumer spending, and also the idea that that which we don't have right now is just a matter of time before we get.
Actually, I must say that I noticed that you are very passionate when you speak about investing in human capital.
Yes, sir.
And usually most politicians will start by enumerating other kinds of things like economic factors, economic indexes, this kind of thing. You are speaking mostly about investing in human development.
So we've had a continuous growth, for instance, in the economy. 4.3% before administration. We average 6.3% now. And the question was, has that really affected our people? And if it has affected our people, is it positive? So we have abandoned the belief in trickle-down. We're trying to be proactive. Let us make sure that when there is economic growth, that our people are capacitated to be able to participate. Now, at the end of the day, we think there's a virtuous cycle. Our people are empowered. Hence, they are empowered. They can make sure that the government is doing what it should do at all the time. And for me personally, it starts out from the period during our history when we were under martial law. And I had to ask my father, who was the #1 opposition member at the time, first person to be detained for 7 years and 7 months at that. I asked him, if we are fighting for that which is right, why is it that there are not too many people who are with us? And he said, you know, before freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion become important, freedom from hunger has to be won. If you're concerned with where the next meal will come from, everything else becomes irrelevant. So at the end of the day, not just to correct what is right now, but to ensure that what transpires later on continues the reform trend. Then the people have to be empowered. So we have to capacitate them. And it touches on all fronts. Be it, for instance, when you talk about health, let's improve the health system, and the people are so malnourished that they have no natural immunities. They are vulnerable to anything and everything. So you can have the best hospitals, the best medicine, the best doctors, and at the end of the day, they keep going back to the hospitals. So again, in essence, the strength that we believe that makes us challenge all the vested interests emanates from constant support by our people. And it behooves us to continue increasing their capacities and their strengths, because that is what will perpetuate the reforms that have happened with or without our presence.
So the human element is very important.
Yes, sir.
Especially speaking about investment opportunities
Yes, sir.
in the Philippines. Now, within the cooperation agreement with the European Union, what are the specific measures that the Philippines will take in order to facilitate investment?
Well, look at the private-public partnership program. So we've number one, we've tried to remove as much as possible regulatory risk. We've tried to take that out of the equation when people invest. Will the regulatory environment change? Will it change 180 degrees, for instance? We have tried to shield them from that. They manage the commercial risks because that is their expertise. We try to remove regulatory risks because we want to be true to when we had incentives that we offered them, that disincentives do come about. Second, we have transformed the whole process to make it very, very transparent. Previously, there were published specifications in terms of references that had a lot of variables that were either written in invisible ink or in very fine print, or not written at all. And this would make a conservative and upstanding entity be hesitant to participate in the process. Correction was, let's make it more transparent. Let's have all of the terms of reference there. Let us eliminate that issue of it's not what you know, but rather who you know into the equation. Hence, the result is in the public-private partnership program, in the past 18 years, the previous administrations, they've generated a total combined of 6 PPP projects, for solicited projects. In our 4 years, we have already had 8 awarded PPP projects, so we've surpassed that. And there are at least 20 who have reached the maturation point that they can be bidded out. And another, if I'm not mistaken, 50 undergoing all of the processes needed before that. So facilitating, that's one. And then the second aspect is the engagement. For instance, in this issue of the fishing issues, we have talked to them. They've brought certain issues to our attention, and we have acted. And we've every commitment that we've had with the European Union has been met with tremendous effort to comply with the standards that have already been set. So at the end of the day, we both share democratic principles. We have capitalist markets for the most part. We have shared aspirations as to what we want to happen with regards to our respective countries and peoples. So this is basically a natural progression, and government's function is to ensure that it doesn't become a hindrance towards that natural progression.
You mentioned specifically fisheries.
Yes, sir.
I think there is some, I wouldn't call it misunderstanding. To begin with, I think it's very important for the Philippines. It's a very large industry in general.
Yes, sir.
What is the state of discussions with the European Union specifically on fisheries?
Okay. Well, first of all, perhaps we should illustrate some of the givens as far as we're concerned. We have a 36,000-kilometer coastline. We have, in terms of patrolling this coastline alone, we have about 132 naval ships. Most of them were new during World War II. Okay. We're in the process of upgrading that, let alone the Coast Guard services and the particular agency in charge of fishing, which is called Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. You have global climate change that has changed migration patterns. Some of our fishing fleets do not operate already in our waters given that the change in migration patterns. Now, having said all of that, there was a 16-point checklist handed by the EU, and my Secretary of Agriculture tells me that we're already now compliant with 14 of them. The last two remaining, One is amendments to the Fisheries Code of the Philippines. This has already reached finished debates in the lower chamber, which means that there will be a vote already for passage of the measure. And in the upper chamber, they are already having the plenary debates, which is the second to the last step as far as approving by that chamber. So, and they're an independent branch of government, but we will be prevailing upon them to finish the deliberations and act it into law. We expect that passage of the amendments by the end of this year or before the end of this year. The last means increasing the number of personnel in that period that I mentioned. We have already added about 700 or so. We have an additional 900 undergoing training to fulfill all of our commitments with regards to reporting, regulating, and catching those who are transgressing our fisheries code.
Now, fisheries brought us to the sea.
Yes, sir.
I know lately there has been some tension in the South China Sea.
Yes.
South China Sea, no, excuse me. Actually, today, after your meeting with President Van Rompuy, there was mention of that. You exchanged views, he says, on the regional situation.
Yes, sir.
And he said that it's essential that all parties seek peaceful and cooperative solutions. He's obviously referring to this situation.
Yes, sir.
Exactly what is your take on this?
Well, I brought some visuals over. Perhaps it can explain it better. This is not an accurate map, no? In the sense that it starts off with the Chinese claim of the so-called 9-dash line, all of these lines. When you try to fix a geographical position, you have a longitude and latitude, which are exact points. A dash is not a point. We are told that sometime in the late 1940s, an officer of the Kuomintang government of Chiang Kai-shek took out a map, drew on the line, and said, all of this is ours. Okay. This is
freehand.
Freehand.
Yes, yes.
And that's why no points. So when you actually ask, what do these dashes correspond to in terms of longitude and latitude, nobody can actually tell you. So this is an approximation. Okay. Now, couple this with, look at some of the other, where China and the Philippines are both signatories to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, wherein everybody has a set of entitlements, where disputes have a mechanism of resolution and so on and so forth. Now, one of the areas, for instance, this is the Reed Bank. We call it the Recto Bank. This is 80 miles from Palawan, which is in the southern Luzon portion of the Philippines. Again, 80 miles. The closest is Hainan in China, this portion, because this is Vietnam, and that is over 500 miles from. So it's beyond their exclusive economic zone. Now, this was the first issue under my watch. We granted the service contract to a firm that was exploring for oil and natural gas. And they prevented, Chinese agencies prevented our exploratory ship from completing the survey. That happened in, I think, 2012. Then we had another incident here called the Scarborough Shoal, 120 miles from the coastline of Masinloc, Zambales, and again, substantially more from China. And there were fishermen in the Scarborough Shoal, eventually identified as Chinese, who were capturing endangered species. So our naval vessel transiting, there was a launch from North Korea of a satellite, and it was going to fall in this portion. The Philippine naval vessel was transiting to observe where the third stage of that rocket was going to pass. Chanced upon this fisherman and had to enforce our fisheries laws, also in accordance with UNCLOS, and also with observation of the treaty called CITES, which is the Convention on International Traffic of Endangered Species. So they saw, at least on 2 boats, coral shells, giant clams, and baby sharks, which are all in the list of endangered species. Again, Chinese vessels prevented our naval vessel from carrying out their maritime function. And all throughout, we have been trying to settle this amicably, not try to inflame passions going to the media. Now, unfortunately, they have actually stationed almost permanently ships on Scarborough Shoal. And there are reports that at times our fishermen were not even allowed to go inside the shoal, which is a natural
habitat
for shelter.
For shelter, yes.
During inclement weather. Now, the latest provided to me by our intelligence services shows submerged rocks in 2012. So then there's a ship, a dredging ship, appeared in 2013 that eventually produced islands on the same feature. Now, there is a school of thought that says this island, suddenly, if it's inhabitable, will now grant it territorial rights of 12 nautical miles. So there are agreements. The Declaration of Conduct on the South China Sea says that you're not supposed to have improvements. You're not supposed to increase tensions in the area. Now, there are disputes. China has been asking us to settle this matter bilaterally. And we say, in the Spratlys, which was the core area of contention, in ASEAN alone, there are 4 countries that have claims, competing claims. Then you have Taiwan, plus the People's Republic of China. 6 countries have competing claims. We will settle it bilaterally. How will that be binding on the 4 others? No. So we have been suggesting, can we not handle this multilaterally? There is a Declaration of Conduct of claimants in the South China Sea that was framed in 2002 when they failed to come up with the code of conduct that was binding. In 2012, we raised the matter up. This is the 10th anniversary, and we still don't have the code of conduct that will govern how we are supposed to deal with each other. Now, we're pushing that through ASEAN because it's an ASEAN document in collaboration with the People's Republic of China. At the same time, we have gone to arbitration, and arbitration is not to increase the tensions, but rather have a determination, what are our rights, what are our obligations under UNCLOS. So that is the only thing we're trying to do. Now, it's in the media that there are various tensions with China with several countries. We're worried, for instance, that at one point in time, the former ambassador said, we don't have an air defense identification zone over the South China Sea, but we may impose one. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing is fisheries. They have a local law, local ordinance that says those who intend to fish in the South China Sea or the portions bounded by the 9-dash line have to register with them. So our fishermen who operate within our 200 EEZ, and the first E of EEZ is exclusive. So we don't understand why we have to register with them if they start imposing that old law that they claim. So again, just to reiterate, the 9-dash line says that everything within is theirs.
Yes, I understand. So, do you have anything that's positive, let's say, for the future? Do you believe that it can be solved either by arbitration, as you mentioned, or in the International Court of Law?
Well, the arbitration, hopefully, will at least clearly establish whether or not the 9-dash line is a valid theory or if it is in contravention to UNCLOS, amongst others. And it will tell everybody their entitlements as well as their duties and obligations, as opposed to right now it's his opinion, their opinion, our opinion, which doesn't lend itself to... It's
an independent judge, let's say, in this case. You mentioned a very positive role played by the ASEAN in this matter as well. You know, the Philippines is a constituent member of ASEAN. You were one of the first that entered this grouping, let's say. The European Union has a cooperation agreement with ASEAN as well. What do you believe that currently are the biggest problem for this group?
The South China Sea issue?
No, for the ASEAN. For ASEAN.
Well, we have a lot of challenges. Of course, each country is maturing in terms of its political development. Global climate change is already an issue. For instance, in the Philippines, we have a very low carbon footprint, but we get hit by what we believe are the effects of global climate change. Typhoon Haiyan in particular is supposed to be the strongest recorded typhoon to hit landmass. It affected close to 5% of our population, disrupted their lives, their transitions in Myanmar, Thailand also, for that matter, change of government in Indonesia, the issues in the South China Sea with regards to how does it help enhance stability, which is the necessary component for prosperity. Now, through all of these challenges and our interaction with the European Union, when they add their voice, the South China Sea, for instance, carries 40% of world trade.
40%.
Those are the figures that are represented to me. And then everybody's interest of freedom of navigation, stability of the rules, then that adds to making everybody who wants to be a responsible member of the world community to behave in an appropriate manner. And from our part, from the very start, we've said that our primary focus is our people. And we cannot have the growth that all of us aspire without the stability. So if we were focused on achieving that stability, then we have the wherewithal to be able to pursue our goal of improving the lives of our people. And we keep saying that particular message.
Well, this message is not only about the Philippines, it's about everybody.
Yes.
So in that note, Mr. President, thank you very much for being with us.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being with us at a New Europe Studio special.